So to correlate the data from the teacher interview and the teacher survey, the survey showed a big strength that current teachers are currently using instructional best practices for ELLs. The interviews actually really revealed more about the barriers that ELLs are facing to perform lower end standardized tests. So first of all, ELLs need a more inclusive curriculum during content area instruction and also in a testing environment. It also revealed that teachers can control certain things about the instructional opportunities for ELLs by making sure they understand directions, have a chance to build background knowledge, receive scaffolds for grammar, academic language, and vocabulary. And then lastly, and most importantly, more work could be done to train teachers about the barriers relating to cultural bias and effective filters for ELLs. So according to this data, an action plan was created. The first step of the action plan is for teachers to do a book study about the book Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. Before each staff meeting, staff will be responsible for reading 2 chapters of the book, and these are mandatory staff meetings for all teachers. At the staff meeting, leadership will facilitate discussions about the chapters that were read, and this will allow staff to reflect on their current practices, but also brainstorm application to the classroom with their grade level teams. And then lastly, staff will apply what they've learned from the discussions and the reading by answering exit ticket questions in the form of a Google Classroom. And leadership will post those questions on the Google Classroom before the trainings. The second part of the action plan is to make sure that the action plan is actually implemented. So teams will be unpacking standards at weekly PLCs. And basically they'll be using a protocol from impact teams to unpack the standards. The protocol engages teams in researching the standard, defining the key concepts and skills, defining the cognitive rigor for task development, agreeing on the relevant and big ideas or essential understandings, determining key competencies, and developing rubric-bound formative assessments. And that's the original protocol, but in order to add elements of culturally responsive teaching to the unpacking standards protocols, teams will also plan metacognitive strategies to use to help ELLs become more independent learners. Teams will also check implicit bias and the cultural inclusivity of the content they are teaching and check if they need to add more multicultural elements. And then there will be 3 more steps during the unpacking and planning steps. Teachers will plan to allow students to make connections to the content and build on background knowledge. Teachers will plan collaboration with peers through the use of talking routines. And teachers will plan differentiated instruction by intentionally using the best practice strategies for ELLs. So the goal of the action plan is to define culturally responsive teaching for staff and apply culturally responsive teaching practices to planning and instruction in order to address barriers faced by ELLs in the classroom. And there are 3 objectives. The first one is to address with all stakeholders an understanding of culturally responsive teaching, to collaboratively reflect on current practices and then apply culturally responsive teaching to the planning process during the unpacking standards protocol, and last, to collaboratively use culturally responsive teaching during the instruction of ELLs. So in order to measure the effectiveness of this training, a teacher survey will be given about culturally responsive teaching practices, and the survey will be based on the book study. Teachers will take a pre-assessment at the beginning of the year, and then they'll take the same assessment at the end of the year after receiving the book study and after participating in the weekly PLCs. And the data from the beginning of the year and the end of the year can be compared to check for growth in the area of culturally responsive teaching and to also guide future goals in the area of culturally responsive teaching. And lastly, more data will be collected from ELL's actual work in the classroom. And then similar to the unpacking standards protocol, a protocol called the EAA protocol will be used for teachers to reflect on their instruction and the practices they use with ELLs. EAA stands for evidence, analysis, and action. So there's 3 steps as part of this protocol. The first step is to collect evidence, and this is basically samples of student work from the classroom. The second step is to analyze that data, and teachers will look for strengths or obstacles in the samples from the students, and they will sort the students into groups of proficient, advanced, approaching, or beginning. And